Good evening, everybody, and thank you for joining us for tonight's Farm Advisory Service webinar. I am Mary Dalglish and I work for SEC Consulting in Perth, and I've been coordinating this series of webinars on behalf of the Farm Advisory Service. So as you may well know, this is the second in our series of webinars. This time last week, we covered advertising for applicants to the agricultural world, and there is that recording available on the Farm Advisory Service website that you can now catch up on. And once again this evening we've been joined by Greenburn HR to cover the topic of making your farm an attractive place to work. So if you've joined us in any of our other labour or farm people based webinars, you may well already be familiar with Greenburn, but if not, they're a company specialising in HR, strongly rooted in the agri and rural industry. Clients range from individual farms right up to large membership organisations, and their motto is that they specialise in getting the right people in the right place with the right skills at the right time. Please take this opportunity to put your questions to Gail and Sophie, who are here with us this evening. There's two ways you can do that. Along the Zoom toolbar, which is quite often black, most frequently down the bottom, if you're on a laptop or more tablet device, you'll see both a Q&A and a chat button. The chat you can send direct to me, you can send it to everybody, you can just toggle on the little blue bar as to whether it goes to a particular person or it goes to everyone, or you can also use the Q&A for your questions. If you would like to submit an anonymous question, then the Q&A function is the place to do that, as once you've typed out your question, you can simply tick the box that you wish the question to be anonymous. So please do keep putting questions in there as we're going throughout the webinar. You don't need to wait till the end. I'll be monitoring the two boxes as we're going through, and I can find an opportune moment to bring it up with Gail and Sophie. So without further ado, I'll hand over to them both to get us underway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mari. Thank you very much for everyone for joining us again this week. As Mari said, we did do a webinar last week. It's a slightly later slot last week because of some Zoom diary clashes, but the recording is available. This week, we're doing making your farm an attractive place to work. And as if you joined when Gail just joined on the Zoom there, you'll hear that slightly drier topic, quite technical this week. So we're going to interject some stories of things that we have come across. And yes, please, there's different topics in here, as you can see, which always raise questions. Send those questions through. We'll handle them throughout the webinar. And genuinely, we do enjoy your questions and we like to answer them. But with no further ado, let's get on with today's topic. So we're going to be going through 7 major points. Everyone's favourite, the Agricultural Wages Order Scotland, hours in agriculture, financial packages, benefits packages, house and tied properties, pensions, training and development opportunities. And if you're with us last week, I have a beware slide again at the end of this for things to look out for. So, Agricultural Wages Order Scotland. It is a joy, the AWO, and I will refer to it as AWO throughout. I spend a lot of my time working with the AWO. So let's just quickly clarify who the AWO protects or works with or works for. So someone who works in farming, rearing animals, growing produce, with the exceptional ones, forestry, horticulture, including market gardens and nurseries, but not massive display gardens. Egg production is a controversial topic with the AWO and something I've had many conversations with them about, purely because of the packing houses, which I'll just clarify in a minute. And also fish farming. There's a caveat on that one, because the AWO very, very transparently says fish farming when it's related to agriculture. So sometimes there's question marks with what the AWO says, and actually they're a fantastic resource to talk to when those question marks arise. Someone, in terms of who it doesn't cover, someone who works in packing houses. Traditionally, packing houses fall under the production industry and are not covered under the AWO. However, in egg production, packing houses are covered. Don't ask me why. The technicalities of it are really, really small. engineers or maintenance workers. So a lot of you who have farms will have individuals who are purely on your farm for maintenance. They actually aren't covered under the AWO or its restrictions. And interestingly enough, gamekeepers aren't covered either. Gail, have you come across anything unusual when it comes down to who the AWO covers?
Well, I've had a few horrors myself relating to pack houses, I have to say. I think in most pack houses where we've got fruit clients, there's some of the large fruit organizations, their pack houses, they do come under the AWO, but you and I both had discrepancies with different clients who I was going to say produced or manufactured, but produced eggs. And Sophie had to go forward to the AWO advice service and say, does the pack house come under AWO? She got a yes, and when I had the same problem about 2 months later, I got a no. So it is tricky, and the best thing to do is just pick up the phone and ask them, because then you can always refer back to the person you spoke to in case it gets challenged, because we've known a few, quite a few this year, different sorts of organizations who've had audits done, or they've gone, the AWO representatives of them have gone on site to check that salaries are being paid in the right order. So when it's anything that you think, is this actually agricultural or not, pick up the phone and check. It's really worth it.
Absolutely. And also bear in mind that there might be some of you out there who have a diverse portfolio in terms of your farm. So you've actually got biomass, or you've got a larder of some description. Larders fall under retail. So just be careful of which industry those fall under, because the AWO doesn't cover everybody. And I think it's sometimes exclusively used in farming and in agriculture, and that's not actually the case. Now, for the even better bit that everyone always understands, is the AWO's finances. So I'm going to run through the top points. You'll know the first couple, but then the latter ones tend to get missed or overlooked. So we know $9.50 per hour up to 39 hours. Caveat on that is they have to have 26 weeks employment before that particular 39 hours kicks in. Everyone knows that. We're all paying that. Good. Yep, I like to hear that. Overtime hours, 14.25, time and a half, over 39. Again, the caveat applies depending on when they start with you. Easy peasy so far. $5.95 per hour for employees studying an SCQF level 4 or 5 for up to 18 months. So that could be a student. That could be someone coming into Agri for the first time, and they've decided to enter Agri by going through the academic field. So we can deduct their salary, bring it right down, $5.95. That isn't age dependent for up to 18 months. $5.95 per hour for apprentices under 19, or for apprentices for their first year, regardless of age. Then we get into the tricky stuff. If you take on an employee who has an SCQF 6 or 7, level 6 or 7, or an equivalent national certificate or diploma, and AWO details them all, we have to pay them $141 an hour additional to the $9.50. And then the stonker that's hidden deep in the AWO, if someone, an employee who's potentially living on site, has a dog that is used for work purposes, £7.01 per week for each dog, up to a maximum of 4. Gail, I know you've had an interesting case with that recently. Do you want to tell us a bit of the detail on that one?
Yeah, I had an interesting one where one of our larger clients had an audit because 2 of their workers had submitted a complaint to the AWO saying they weren't being paid enough. Part of the complaint was around this £1.41 per hour additional for the SCQF qualification. Now, this is really interesting because The two people that complained were the SCQF qualifications.
You can just say qualification. It's too much of a trauma.
It didn't exist because both people were, I'm sure they won't mind me saying, they were 50 plus, so that qualification didn't exist, but they claimed that they had a City and Guilds qualification, and therefore they should have been receiving the 1.4 to 1 per hour additional. Not only were they claiming it now, but they were actually looking for a back payment going back 7 years.
Which is the maximum limit, we'll just specify.
Yeah, so you need to be careful of this. Interesting enough, by the time this got to me and I had the chance to speak to the people at the AWO, it's the employer's responsibility to ensure that they have asked the workers when they joined them for proof or anything that they've got that shows that they've got these qualifications. In this particular instance, one person had been employed on the estate for about 15 years, and the other person had been employed on the estate for 4 years. The chap that had been there for 15 years actually claimed this, but he didn't have any proof. He didn't have anything. And yet the AWO said it was still payable. It's a really, I think, to be honest, we thought it was a very, very grey area. And obviously this rate goes up occasionally. So the AWO had actually calculated what this person was doing back pay. And quite honestly, it was several £1,000s. And when I said, but there's no certificate, the guy can't prove that he's got that. And they just said, actually, well, it's not up to him to prove it. When he was appointed, the manager or the owner of the estate should have checked it out at that point. So that's it. So just be careful of these little tricky things. So there were two people that raised complaints. One of them raised a complaint that he was being paid for one dog, but he had 2 dogs. When he joined them in his first year of employment, he had 2 dogs. At the end of the first year of employment, one of the dogs sadly passed away. And so we're now 4 years down the line and he's still wanting to claim for the 2 dogs. Now, I think maybe there was a bit of artistic license in there, but when the AW go out on site, they take the facts as they're given to them. It's not up to them to judge. They just collate the facts and the information. So again, the estate owner in this particular case received a reasonably large sum for the dog that had passed away after the first 12 months. So again, it's really worth making sure you understand this stuff, and when you are recruiting people, that you really go into the detail of what are their qualifications, and if they don't have any, make sure you make some notes. Don't have any, there's no evidence of any, so a claim can't come back at you years later. That one's still ongoing. Actually, I haven't managed to actually get an agreement yet.
It certainly is. I see Mari's face on screen, so I know something's coming.
I was just going to interject. It's like just something that I find, because I know that, reading the Wages Board book myself, the SCQF 67 thing, it's baffling. But I was going to say I find it quite effective if you want to check a qualification, is actually if you use like a search engine, Google, type in the qualification name, and then quite often put in the abbreviation SQA for Scottish Qualifications Authority. Obviously, if they came from England, it's, maybe not going to work, but it's just quite a good help. It should then give you the SCQF level, goodness knows what that stands for, but that can be a helpful one. It tends to be kind of the HNCs, HNDs that a lot of people come out of the kind of Scottish agri colleges with are that level or above, but it is just a good way to check if you get a random one. But certainly I find the Wages Board guide for workers and employers a really useful reference, and I can circulate that link around the attendees in the follow-up email in case anybody would like to read around this a little bit more.
Perfect, thank you. I'm sure that absolutely after this they're going to just be wanting to read all of that information. They won't be terrified half to death. We do try to terrify you a little bit. We also try to reassure you that there are always solutions to the problems. So even if you do end up with a wonderful letter from the AWO stating that there's all these claims against you, always remember that they have only spoken to the employee so far. They have taken facts from the employee, their perspective, It is then the employer's right and duty to challenge those. So paperwork. You know, we're HR, we always will convince you to try and take notes for everything, but genuinely in these cases, notes are important from conversations, timesheets are important. So let's leave the AWO behind a little bit and move on to current day financial packages. What are we looking at here? So hourly versus salary. Gail, would you like to talk us through some of the benefits of hourly versus salary?
I think one of the biggest benefits here we find is that if you, in most cases, not all cases, but in most cases, certainly in small and much larger farms that we work with, the salary is quite bumpy. So in the winter months, it's flat. And then in the summer months, when crop production or calving, all sorts of things, it goes right up like that for overtime hours. That can be quite difficult to budget for, to be honest, in businesses. You can use historical information to sort of think, right, about April, May, we're calving and the overtime is going to go through the roof and that's going to be a big hit. So one of the things you might want to do is you might want to look across their salary, look across the payments that people are made, which you'll see evidenced in their P60, which shows their total sort of taxable earnings for a year. And then look to see if you can sort of flatten out that line by paying them the average pay. So you look over 52 weeks, you take the P60 gross earnings, divide it by 52, look to see what typically they're earning a week, and then you pay them that, the same amount of pay each week or each month, however you pay it. They still incur, obviously, the worker incurs PAYE and NIC deductions, but it's good from the employer point of view because actually you can really budget and you can manage your budgets over a year. For the employee, they know they're going to get the same salary every single week or month. So that's an interesting one, and it's a lot of people that we work with have been moving in that direction. I think it's right, Sophie, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, haven't they?
Yeah, certainly we try and convince them to move in that direction as well. So it's a positive movement. The problem with hourly is that you are using the AWO's hourly amounts if you haven't enhanced them in any way. And what overtime has occurred and is payable. That's the end of the day. What hours are worked, they are payable. With a salary, and I'll quickly just do an explanation of how you would determine this. With a salary, you give them a per annum earning, and you can split it equally over 12 months. We'll talk a little bit about how the AW actually supports this. That means that you take into account what their average hours are going to be throughout the year. That takes into account all the peaks and troughs dependent on your season. And as Gail said, you flatten it out. You give them stable earnings. And actually, for people who don't have tied accommodation and who maybe want to buy and get a mortgage, you'll all know how important it is to have stable earnings coming in to, well, economy at the moment, but stable earnings coming in to go and get a mortgage or other significant borrowings. How to determine what to pay? Now, this is an interesting one. If you are starting, let's, for example, say you've not got a lot of employees and they've not been with you for 52 weeks. So you don't know what their earnings are going to look like. You don't have that P60 to rely on. What you start doing is paying attention to the working hours on your farm. The starting gate is how many hours on average do you expect your team to work per week? Do you expect them to do 5 days a week, 8 hours a day? Do you expect them to work every third weekend, every second weekend? Do you expect during the months of March to June them to be doing 60 hours a week because you're an early carver? You know, you actually take all of that into account and then do the manual calculations. You know that it's $9.50 an hour for up to 39 hours. So you do $9.50 times 39 times 52 weeks of the year. You actually include all the holiday in this at the same time just to work out the annual. If you then know that actually for these 3 months of the year, we're going to be working up to 60 hours. Then 60 minus 39, times that by 1425, times by however many weeks. Add those two together, you're going to see an annual salary. And sometimes they're surprising when you see them in the annual format, and it makes you want to go back and go, actually, how can we adjust this? How can we make these hours work better for us? So that's how you would start, as a complete base rate. And it's the first calculation. If anyone came to me and said, am I paying the right amount, or I want to move to salary, that's the calculation I'd be starting with. Because actually the AWO rates, what do we need to pay for the hours that are being worked to be fair? There is flexibility in that to a certain extent, because overtime hours, etc. If they work overtime that hasn't been approved by you, the employer, by the manager, then we're not going to pay additional to that. You don't pay additional on top of salary unless there's a caveat, an overtime issue. So actually, we take all of those things into account when we're doing those calculations. Here's your caveat: regular overtime, the thing that's been tripping everybody up for the past 5 years. When it happened in employment law first, came down to the AWO, the 12-week average calculation was changed to 52 weeks. So what that means, if you are paying someone hourly or salary, this is what the AWO will look at to determine whether you are paying the right amount. They will look back over the last 52 weeks of employment to see what hours are being worked, and they can do that for up to 3 years. 2 years, it's a 3-month rule, 2 years. They will look back at that overtime, and they will determine from that, have you been underpaying or overpaying? And you'll be surprised what can come out of that 52-week calculation. On top of that, if that is something that's regular, which means it happens on a reasonably regular timescale, it doesn't have to happen every week, but it's something that can be tracked, even seasonally regular, we have to then look at the base rate earnings to enhance them. It's super complex, and we don't have an hour for me to go through the nuanced details of an example of this. But if this is something you think you're struggling with, or you think there's a potential issue with, first thing to do is reach out and ask for someone like me or the AWO to help you do the calculation. Then you can't, again, be caught on the wrong side of it, because actually they don't take kindly to saying that you didn't know, because it is in the AWO. It's a grey area. It's not very transparent, but it is there.
Can I just clarify one point? The whole point about overtime is really important, and we come across this so many times. What we found is that where you've got established workers, or workers that have been with the estate or the farm or the business for quite a long time, quite often they are earning overtime. They don't ask you if they can do the overtime, they just do it. And then they put in on their timesheets that, you know, every Friday and Saturday they've had to work 3-4 hours overtime, hypothetically, and you're paying that. You'll be amazed what that adds up to in the course of a year. So it's your right as the employer, as the manager, to actually say yay or nay to overtime. Really look at it, because it's the finances of your business we're talking about. If that overtime's not necessary, or actually if it really could be done in the normal sort of working day, there's no need for it. But don't let overtime become assumed. Don't let it become a natural sort of rhythm for a worker. And honestly, we really see this on such a regular basis. And we had a dairy farmer, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, where he was paying, you know, up to 20 hours overtime every single week. And even in the quiet time, even in the winter months, when actually he's actually working time, because they needed the lights, so the working hours in the winter moved down to literally an 8-hour day, and yet they had one worker that was still claiming 20 hours a week and for cleaning. And when it was challenged, the guy had been doing it for the last 10 years. And that's when he did his cleaning. And actually the farmer, in this particular case, the dairy farmer, could actually have managed to plan that cleaning schedule into the daily workload. So just be careful. This is your money that's going out the door. So with overtime, it's really important that you're on it and you know why people are doing overtime. And if you look at corporate businesses, if you need to do overtime, I can tell you, you need to ask permission. You need to say, I need to do 4 hours overtime to finish this, and they'll say yes or no. So it's a good discipline to get into. It's quite hard to change it if it's become a habit. But if you know, as I said, it's down to money. And as money's getting tighter, just have a look at the overtime that you're paying, and you might find actually there's really something you can do there, and it to your own benefit, to your business benefit.
Absolutely. And we've had a couple of questions through. I could see Mari's face pop up at the same time. And I'm going to let you crack on with your bit, and then I'll tell you the answers.
Okay, sorry, I was forgetting you could see them as well, Sophie. But yeah, I was thinking we'd start with, they both came in at exactly the same time, but we'll start with the one that links on very nicely to what we've just been speaking about there. So the question is, on a salary basis, do we just keep track of overtime for the full year and then pay it to them at the end of the year? So in case later months are short of hours, so in case, I think it's almost what you're saying about budgeting for what overtime you expect them to be working. If you're going to struggle to budget that, can you keep track by timesheets and pay any balance, I suppose, at the end of the year?
Yep. And I've just popped up the next point, the stable income arrangement. So that's what we're talking about in terms of splitting the salary over 12 months. And in terms of your question, you want an annualized hours contract. They work in alignment with each other. So what happens is that on an annualized hours contract, you agree someone's annual working hours. So you can then track the hours, how they peak and trough throughout the year. Again, it's a bit of math to start with, but that means that there should never be an under in terms of worked hours. What you end up doing is slightly underselling it. So for example, let's say that your average working week across the entire year is 45 hours a week, random pull number. During your season, whatever that might be, you're working 60. Let's cap at 60. But then during the winter months, you've got nothing going on. Actually, you don't need them. You're doing maybe 30 hours a week. You deliberately edit that average so that you are only paying up to 45, and then the money evens out. That works really well on a salary, works really well on an annualized hours contract. That's what it's designed to do. However, if you're paying hourly and you are tracking their hours by timesheets, which, yep, absolutely you should be doing, tracking overtime for an entire year, you can do that. You can do it. I've seen people do it. I don't necessarily have an issue. It's just not what I would recommend. I normally recommend paying out either every 6 months or quarterly or 4 monthly, because what will happen for if someone terminates their employment at a strange time of year, then that can cause you issues in terms of the calculation. The AWO can still come at you if you've been storing up their overtime to pay them at the end of 12 months. So actually it's on the employer to ensure that hours are worked, and that's the expectation. So actually it's the employer's duty to say, our winter hours are this and our summer hours are this. And this is the payment that we have agreed to on the basis of that, so that you're ensuring there isn't a point of underworking. Now, I can say that till the cows come home. There will sometimes be cases of underworked hours. You have the right as the employer to deduct from salary any hours not worked. So for example, if you decided to pay the overtime every 6 months, but you got to the end, you paid in June, you got to December and you were like, whoa, this guy is short. I mean, he's going to have to have done something in 6 months to be that short on you, but he's short in some respect. All you have to do is provide notification to the employee that a deduction is going to be made because X amount of hours have been underworked in regard to his contract, then make that deduction directly from his payment. So that's the preference that I go for, just because it's more protective instead of us storing up money to pay later.
Thank you, Sophie. And then our second question for the moment is, what should we be paying senior operators and managers roughly?
Gail, I think this one's for you.
Gosh, this is Do you know
how
what
long's a piece of string?
Yeah, this is a tough one, because we've seen what the AWO advises. I can tell you, it depends what sort of managers you're talking about or asking about, to be honest. Farm managers of a medium-sized farm, at the moment, the salaries are between sort of £50,000 and £60,000 a year, plus the house, plus the various benefits that go with it. We have seen a 6% increase this year in the financial in the agricultural sector on pay, and in the dairy sector it's been more than that, because there is such a shortage of staff everywhere that, in fact, you know, if you're a worker, you can, and you're good, and you've got good references, you can almost go and dictate whatever salary you want. So one of the things that we're finding is that, let's say, managers on farms, let's say an operations manager on a farm at the moment, and we have a vast number of clients across all different disciplines, but the average salary that we're seeing at the moment for an operations manager is between 32 and 36,000. That's a bracket. Now that's gone up considerably. They are salaried, they tend to be salaried, they tend to be paid monthly, they do have tied cottages as well, and various other benefits. But the good ones can move from one estate or farm to another and actually say, this is what I'm looking for. We've got some that are paid over 50,000, and as I said, we're working with averages here, but the average that we've seen on a sort of medium-sized business is between 32 and 35,000. The agricultural wages order actually doesn't even cater for this. It doesn't cater for it at all. And I think going forward, it's going to become more and more problematic, because we don't have the people with the right skills, or we do have lots of people with the right skills and knowledge, but they're valuable. They're really valuable now. And we just don't have enough of them. So we have to pay what's going. And we've seen a considerable increase in salaries, even for a general farm worker. We've seen general farm workers now averagely being paid about 11 to 11.20 an hour. If that helps. It probably doesn't. It's probably very depressing, but
I know this topic isn't sometimes great, because it's just a lot of figures. Yeah. I've certainly put now, bear in mind, trainee assistant managers in place recently for salaries of 29,000. And I had a junior farm manager come on farm, had all the right skills. He knew he was valuable. He demanded 40,000, and he still, even though he got it, he achieved that offer, he played it onto another farm and they gave more. There's a lot of playing on the industry. And the unfortunate reality is this happened in the more corporate world years ago, and employers became wise to it. Agri has never been in a situation it's been in terms of employment, and the ones that are qualified, the ones that are valuable to us, they are playing employers against each other. So you'll often find, if you are looking for staff, you might find a perfect person, but they're just testing the water, and they may go back to their current employer and say, well, I found a job and he's willing to offer me this. And everyone is countering everyone. And we don't want to get into a game of negotiation. When it comes to employee salaries, it's too dangerous, it's too costly, and you end up agreeing to something eventually that you don't want to do. So you actually go in, I always suggest, I know Gail does as well, that you go in with a bracket of where you're happy to be. And you move forward with that, and you stick to it, and you've given yourself, you know, in your mind where your negotiation points are, and that's how you progress. And you will find people within that for the skills, but you have to be, as we said in the last webinar, are you shopping for the final product, or are you shopping for something that's partway done? So you're going to have to be on the current market shopping for halfway done, and you take that into account during the salaries.
I think as well, the salaries vary a little from region to region, from north to south. So try and just be aware when you're going around and meeting friends or colleagues, just try and make sure that you find out what this, don't ask them what you're paying Jack. because you won't get an answer. But what salary bracket are you paying? You know, and if you ask about a bracket, or you're after, if you say, you know, have you got, you know, within a sort of level, you know, within about 5 grand, what are you paying? You'll find people will generally answer that because they can be a bit vaguer. It's very, very important now, I think, for everybody that's looking for management, people that have got management qualities in the agricultural sector, wherever that may be, to have some understanding of what these salaries are like in your particular area. Certainly in the Perthshire area, it was only about maybe about March time that we became aware from one of our sort of not a client, but somebody that we knew of, that had appointed a new farm manager at a basic salary of £72,000 a year. Good job I was sitting down when I heard it. I nearly fell down, on a relatively small farm, but it did have some very unique breeds on the farm, and that's what they were paying the extra money for. But that's a significant sum of money when you look at all the extras that come with this, with the tied cottages and the farm vehicles and all these things.
Absolutely. Now, I know salaries can be a bit of a hot topic, so we'll move on. But again, come back to us and have discussions if you have questions about what to pay and what payments look like. Pension, our favourite. There's not a lot to say here. We're getting onto slides with probably less to say, which you'll be glad about because technical details. Everyone needs to have a pension if they meet the base criteria. So what is the minimum pension? 3% employers contribution, 5% employees contribution. Nest is the biggest provider. It's the government one, and have fun if you are the one that gets to put everything on Nest, because it's a really helpful platform, said nobody. Then on top of that, what can you do with pension to make it more interesting? It's amazing now that the generations that are coming through the workplace are more interested in their pension. They're more interested in the savings they're going to have when they reach retirement age, which for some of us feels like it's going to be 100 by the time they finish. So how do we make it more interesting? What can we do? Obviously, it's easy. You could enhance it. You could enhance the employer's contribution. Is that the best way of doing it? Maybe not. Maybe it's not something you want to contribute. However, what you could offer is that your employees can do a salary sacrifice, which essentially means they allow you to take a certain portion of their salary pre-tax and put it into their pension. Now, Gail, you're much better on pensions than I am. Do you want to just quickly explain what a salary sacrifice looks like for the employer?
Well, basically, it's a way that the employer can pay more into their own pension from money that is untaxed. And that's the important thing. So if you've got somebody that earns £500 a week, and at the moment they're just paying the very basics payment going into pension, they could actually salary sacrifice £50 of that, and it comes off their pay before it goes through the tax calculation. So it's really quite good for them. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is where the little twist on this is that as the employer, if that £50 stayed in their normal salary, they'd pay PAYE on it, but you as the employer would pay employers NI. I believe employers NI is currently 12.3%. That £50 that you're paying 12.3% on, you would have to pay that. There's no choice. If they sacrifice it, it means that you don't have to pay that 12.3%. But what a lot of employers are doing is they are giving that 12.3% back to the employee as long as it goes into their pension fund. So it's a way, it's money that you would have spent. Let's be honest, it's money you would have had to spend. You wouldn't have had any choice. It's a real bonus that all of a sudden you're saying, well, you're willing to pay that extra 50 quid in, and we're going to pay the extra 12.3% on that. We'll let you have it because we're not having to pay it in this other way. So it's about the only thing you can do is pensions, unless you really want to enhance them. That's expensive. To be honest, it hits your bottom line straight away. But this way, if you can encourage people to take responsibility for their pensions and pay a little bit more in, The benefits are, you know, as I said, they're not being taxed on it, so the gross amount goes in, and then you're enhancing it by 12.3%. So always round, you look like the great employer, which is what we want.
Yeah. It's a certain amount of future proofing. It's, you know, a lot of people in agri wouldn't do this, wouldn't have heard of it, wouldn't know about it. But actually, when you put these offers out on the table and you explain the benefits, yes, they might not have that 50 quid or the 100 a month or something in their pay packet, but that's going to come back to them. And it's actually in a really protected pot as well. So it's an option. Not everyone would ever want that, but it's an option, and it does cost less than having to constantly enhance the employer's contribution. As Gail said, hits your bottom line, and not always appreciated that it hits it either. Now, I'm going to flick past this slide quite quickly, I think. Work-life balance. So obviously everyone's heard of work-life balance. It's nothing new, it's not uncommon. What we're finding is that more and more candidates are looking for a farm to work on that offers them more work-life balance, offers them some lifestyle choices. They're making lifestyle career choices. So they're wanting to join a business that gives them decent benefits, good benefits, that has some sort of training development options for them so they can develop in their career, and we'll cover those a little bit later, but also that doesn't work them to the bone. Now, in agri, this is a newer topic. This is a harder one because in reality, you need to work. If you've got livestock, anything like that, you need to work every day. There's a constant demand. What this is maybe asking is that actually there are better rotas in place. There might have to be one more member of staff to help that rota out. It depends how you work it, what your requirements are. Legally, there's restrictions on how many days in a row you can work an employee. That's the legal requirement, and I'll cover the detail of that in a second. As you saw last week, we showed you an advert from one of the client farms that we're working with, and they went out to market to say they were going to do a 4 days on, 4 days off rota. And we got a huge amount of feedback just from the industry generally of how was this going to work? What was this going to look like? How are all the jobs going to get done? And actually what they've done is taken a very clever approach. They were offering people the lifestyle they wanted. They wanted to have balance between work and life. And actually it allowed people from further away to then travel, stay on site for 4 days and then leave. They also offered it as an 8 day on, 8 day off rota. But what they're trying to do is find this balance between getting the job done and keeping the employees happy, which sometimes feels like a never-ending task. I'm not going to disagree with that, but finding a way to keep people happy that they want to stay with you. You're not having to constantly recruit, constantly cover gaps. That's what we're talking about in work-life balance. And it's always just something to consider. And I know it can feel very frustrating for a farm owner, because actually this is your business, this is your baby. You are there every day. That doesn't mean the employee has to do the same thing. We have to find balance for them because we want to keep the best ones, and keeping the best ones means we have to sacrifice some of those expectations. Gail, have you got anything to add before we skim on from that slide?
I just think this is something that we all need to think about as employers, to be honest, because it's come the younger people coming into the workplace now. One of the first things, and we interview lots of people all week, one of the first things we're asked about how many hours I'm expected to work. I don't want to be working 60 hours a week in the summer months. I've got a young family. I can't do this. I can't do that. And I think this work-life balance really needs some thought, because what will happen, and it's going to be the same, let's say in the corporate business world, where lots of businesses are now really either actively doing it or considering moving down to a 4-day week. A 4-day week still being paid what everybody was paid for 5 days. Now that is really catching on. It's moving fast, and we can see it every day. In agriculture, it's more difficult. As Sophie said, most of you have got livestock, you've got crops, but people that come to work for you, especially sort of the generations coming in, they don't want to do the hours that their dad did or their mom did. They don't want that for themselves. And so this one big farm that we work for, been very innovative. You can work 4 on, 4 off, and they're 12-hour shifts, or you can work 8 on, 8 off. And in fact, in this case, the owner of the business has already said, if they, on the 8 days they're off, if they want to drive a taxi or deliver Amazon packages, they can do that. So everybody, I think, really needs to sit back and look at and assess their own business. Initially, there might be a little bit of extra cost because, as Sophie said, you might lead to having another body in place. You know, you need another worker, but it's coming, and it's better to be on the front foot and thinking about this.
Absolutely. Now, we were so pleased with ourselves because we finished on time last week. We've got 15 minutes left, so we're just going to start pushing through some of these slides. Benefits packages. We've just got a list of options. These are options. We're not telling you have to do any of these. We've discussed enhanced pension. You know what that kind of looks like. Options are life assurance, death in service insurance, private medical, or if you don't want to pay the cost for private medical, paying for medicals regularly throughout the year. I say throughout the year, I meant per year. My goodness, throughout the year, you've been in and out of the doctors more times than you wanted. Cycle to work schemes, maybe not something you want to do for the farm, but actually there's a tax benefit for the employee. They get a bike, it's a health thing as well. Actually, it's really no cost to the employer. You pay out for the bike and then they pay you back. It's as simple as that. Childcare vouchers, in the same vein, actually, more supportive for the employee with very little issue for the employer. You could even offer sabbatical options. Obviously, a major thing in corporate, it's a known entity, but could you offer your staff an unpaid 6 to 9 month sabbatical once in their career, where they could potentially go to New Zealand to see how the farm works there, Australia, they could decide to take time off to study a course, but you're protecting their job in the meantime, so they can choose to come back to you if they wish. And because it's unpaid, you can recruit replacement for that. Gail, have you got something to add to that? I think
the sabbatical thing is, don't dismiss it. Young people coming into the workplace, when they're coming out of college or coming out of uni, normally they'll take a gap year. But if they don't, you'll find that 2 or 3 years down the line of working, they suddenly feel that they want a break and they want to do something different before they settle down, you know, with marriage and children. We've seen just a bit of a pattern of this over the last 5 years. The sabbatical option is a great thing to offer because it's for the agricultural sector, it's innovative. There's no cost to you because you can just either bring in contractors, or you could replace with a part-time person while they're away, but you keep the job open, and what you really do is keep the loyalty of that person. I think that's quite important.
I think it would even be, there's a certain element of anyone I speak to who is in farming has an international network. They know people who know people. What kind of options could you offer in terms of, actually, you know someone, let's just pick a random country. You know someone who is doing arable, Finland. Let's just pick that random. It's probably not factual, so don't test me on it. But you know someone. Actually, could you organize, if they wanted, the option for that person to go to that friend farm, network farm, for a 6 to 9 month sabbatical? They take over the payment of that person. You have to take it unpaid and you protect their UK job. But on the interim, you get to bring someone else in to cover the workload. These options are actually really interesting. There's something that I think, actually, if you sat back and thought about it, you know, once upon a time, would you have chosen that option if you could? Probably, yeah, because actually it gives travel and experience and things that everyone wants. Holiday purchase scheme, not one that's going to be popular in agri, but again, something just to know about. You can offer employees an additional week's holiday that they have to buy from you. And again, the deduction is taken pre-tax. So there's savings for both parties on it. Training and development plans, we're going to move on to those, but they are part of a benefits package. So don't dismiss them as anything different.
If you wanted to really consider any of these, the most cost-effective options for any business are life assurance and death insurance, death in service insurance. They're really cost-effective. They don't cost a lot of money, but what a benefit for the workers that you employ. And people really value those. And what you could do is say, we will offer you this benefit after you've been with us for 5 years, 3 years, whatever you want. You don't have to offer it immediately. You can actually say, when you've been with us for 3 years or 5 years, we will give you death in service insurance. And honestly, it's pounds. It's not even hundreds of pounds. We work for the NFUM Mutual, so obviously we would suggest that you speak to them. But when you're looking at benefits to make your own package look better, don't forget they're the best ones to look at in the beginning. Also, if you do want to add benefits onto your general sort of salary remuneration package, speak to your accountant or whoever does your salaries, because for everything that you do, there's a cost. And so what you should do at the end of the year, everybody gets a P60, which is the tax document that tells you what your gross earnings have been. But what people don't get is a sort of statement of all their salary and payments. So what we issue for all our staff, and quite a few of our clients do, we issue a statement that we produce actually here every year, and it shows the basic salary that they've earned, but it shows them the cost to us as a business of their life assurance. Now, their life assurance may only cost us £60 a year, but it shows that's the cost. Their death in service insurance might cost £100 a year, so that's already £160. The pension that we pay for them actually could cost several £1,000s, and we put that on because when you think about it as a business, we don't often show our workers what they actually cost to the business. They see their salary packet and they think, oh my God, that's all I've got. But when you think of all the add-ons, when you look at pension and you look at employers NI, which is a lot, and then you look at anything else you offer, it all adds up. So this is called, we call it an employee benefit statement. So the employee benefit statement, think about that, because actually sometimes we are looking at different challenges we get, and we'll look at P60 earnings to look at overtime and things, and we're shocked at how much somebody earns a year. And we think, God, I bet they don't even realize just how much they're earning. But you add all this on, the employee benefit statement is a little thing that if you could give out each month and get your farm secretary to do it each year, get your farm secretary to do it or do it yourself, and you'll find that all of a sudden that you can say to that employer, well, you might earn £30,000 a year, but actually you're costing us nearer £38,000, and they generally then get to see what their value is to the business.
Absolutely. As you said, there was something you said there that made me think about it. Something I didn't put on here, but again, something to consider in the longer term is you could enhance maternity, adoption, and paternity packages. So, for example, paternity is 2 weeks at 90% of the salary. You could say you're going to pay 2 weeks at 100. You could say you're going to pay 3-4 weeks at 100%. Maternity is 6 weeks at 90%, 33 weeks at the statutory. You could say you're just going to extend after they've worked with you for 2 years, 4 years. You could pay a little bit more in terms of the payment because you already had it calculated you were going to pay it. So there's real things like that that are workful and helpful as well. Houses and tied properties. A tied property is valued at £1 per week according to the AWO, and that's £1 per week you can deduct from someone's salary. It's a benefit. Flag it as such. People forget that it's a benefit, but a tied property is not a tenancy. They're completely different. Scotland has completely different laws in terms of tied properties. And I often hear the two getting intermingled. They are not the same. Tied property is for the better fulfillment of your duties, and it terminates at the end of employment. They lose the right to the property. The employer has to pay the mortgage or the rent, whatever. That's all you have to pay. I see a lot of people paying additional, which is lovely. It's a benefit again, but that's all you have to pay if you have to pay. You do not have to pay, or you can deduct council tax, heating oil, electricity, and other outgoings. you don't have to pay those necessarily. You've already given them the house. Someone else can pay those. What you can ask, if you choose to pay the mortgage, pay the council tax, but heating oil and other outgoings are covered by the employee, you could choose to ask the employee, and it has to be worded very carefully. This is where the contract clause comes into play really heavily. You could ask the employee to pay X amount a month for maintenance of the property. It is not a rental payment because this is not a tenancy. The wording is important. If you ever come into play with tied properties, if you have tied properties with no contracts in place, please, please, please put something in place now, because you want to protect yourselves at the point of termination. Training and development and feedback. Yes,
Sorry, Sophie, I was too slow the last time as well, so I thought I must get in with this question before you move on again. We've had a question come through. It comes back to the benefits packages, the list that you mentioned there. And the question is there a risk to employees incurring benefit in kindness tax, or benefit in kind tax, sorry, with the benefits mentioned?
There is, right, okay, the ones, if you look, there is no benefit, there is no tax on life insurance or death in service insurance. That's not classed as, it doesn't come under the benefit in kind laws. But if you decided to give them private medical insurance like Bupa or PPP, that is definitely a benefit in kind tax. Cycle to work scheme, childcare vouchers also don't fall under benefit in kind. So if you go back over that list there, the only one that is classed as a benefit in kind is private medical.
Perfect. Thank you for that. Thank you. Training and development and feedback. Now, training and development, I hear a lot of people saying, there's no development on my farm. There's nowhere they can go. They can't go up. I'm the highest and they work right underneath me. That doesn't mean you don't have options for training and development. Don't cut the conversation off as soon as that. Training and development is a two-way street, first off. There's also two different options here. There's vertical development, i.e. they can move up the career ladder, or there's horizontal development, which means they expand their knowledge base through training that you offer, through training that they complete themselves. Now, a lot of you will not be able to do career ladder. There just isn't the option to do that. But actually, if we stand back and have a look at what you could offer through horizontal, there might be machines they've never been trained for, so that's new tickets. There might be courses that you have identified that are interesting that you would like them to go on. There's obviously huge ones like rural leadership, or there are smaller, more local ones. Always consider the holistic package, everything that's around you, because actually, I know that I could probably talk to anybody who's watching tonight about their farm and identify a way a new person could join and could develop on the farm. And even if that's not a career development, because let's be honest, people aren't joining us for a lifetime career anymore to a huge extent. They're wanting their own career, their own mind and where they want to go, but they want to get benefit from each employer they join. And we want them to derive benefit from us because we want a good review. We want to be an attractive farm to work at, and we want then more people to want to come work with us. That's the whole point of this. As soon as we stop training and developing our teams, the faster that attractiveness score goes down, because we've become, sorry, Gail, off you go.
No, so I just brought to mind last week, we have got a large estate that are actively recruiting young people from university. And they'd interviewed, honestly, I think probably 15 people, was it, Sophie? I mean, we were beginning to lose count. They hadn't had anybody that was interested in any of the roles they had. The salary was quite good. So I had a bit of a debrief with the estate manager and said, so, you know, when you're interviewing them, because I'm thinking to myself, what is this person saying that, you know, that's putting these youngsters off? There must be something there that I haven't seen. And it turns out that the majority of the people, and we're talking about people that are in their early 20s, were saying, I actually want to develop my career. I'm really quite ambitious, but I want to make sure that I can move, I can develop my skills. And I said to this estate manager, so what was your response to that? And he said, well, there's nowhere to go. When you come in here, there's nowhere to go. So, I mean, that's it. And I said, is that really the answer? I said, because when they come in and they learn to, I don't know, they learn how to use that massive machine that spraying machine that you've got, which has got, it is as big as a row of houses. He said, oh yeah, well, they'll learn to use that within 6 months. I said, and the other machine that you've got over there? And he said, yeah, that's the baler. He said, oh, they'll learn that. So I said, so what you're telling them isn't exactly true. So when we're talking about, there's a real difference between horizontal development, which is if you're in BP, you move up the various levels of managers, and lateral development. And I think please don't undersell your own businesses, because there'll be a lot of lateral development. Somebody will come in and then they'll take on that, and then they'll start doing that, and then they'll be trained to do this, and they might take on health and safety responsibility, leading ultimately to them then starting to manage teams and people. If you give feedback, or if you give the appearance that you don't have, once you come in, that's it, that's what we've got, we don't have we're a very flat structure, there's only me and everybody else. Actually, you'll be underselling your business. So just be careful. It's about words. It really is about the words that you use. Every single business, however small, has loads of opportunities for lateral development. And just remember that, please.
Absolutely. And the thing we said at the bottom there, feedback. If you don't do performance reviews or official sit downs and chats, give feedback, positive and negative or constructive. Give it throughout, give it regularly, and call it feedback. Let them know you're giving them feedback about how they're developing on your farm, how they're fitting in, how their training is going. If we don't do that, it's just like the benefit statement. We're not actually allowing the employee to recognize the investment we've put into them, that we are not only doing an investment in terms of money and training, we're doing it in terms of our own time, because we are taking the time to have that conversation. That's what certainly the generations coming into farming now want from us. And it's such an easy thing for us to give feedback and to have those conversations. Now we're going to run slightly over, so we'll keep going. The beware slide. It's my favorite slide to put in. Things to look out for. Please, 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 please look out for these things. Ensure your holiday entitlement is correct. This gets people in no end of trouble with the AWO. 5 days a week, 28 days, plus 2 for the special holidays. But if you work 5 days a week 1 week, but you work every second weekend, that means you're working 6 days on average a week. Even if, and this is the thing that it infuriates me to death, even if at the weekend you're only working 4 hours, not 8, the AWO see it as a whole day. So please be really wary of your holiday entitlement and where it falls, because if you underpay on holiday, if you don't give the right entitlement, and someone makes a claim, it can be costly. The special days are obviously Christmas and New Year. And again, AWO has got some specific wording about them. If you cannot give the employee that day off as holiday, can get a bit costly for you, because you have to pay them 3 times the amount that they would have earned that day. And that's and that would cancel the day's holiday that was meant to be there. However, if that special day falls on a normal working day, quote unquote, they are paid double time. They're paid for the holiday day and they're paid for the normal working hours day. So be wary of that. It's a complex little thing. The AWO spells it out reasonably clearly, but be careful of the special days. Ensure your team take their entitlement. I don't know how many times I hear people, he doesn't want to take, he doesn't want to do this. Doesn't matter what the employee wants. You are under a duty as the employer to ensure that entitlement is taken, because if you don't ensure it's taken, you have to pay it out. And that's not something we want to do. And again, it's a claimable thing. So be wary of that. And I've said 21 days notice. Let me remember why I said 21 days notice. That was it. If they're not taking their entitlement, you are entitled to book their holiday for them. Just give them 21 days notice that you expect them to be on holiday. And
I love that one.
isn't it great? I always say this, the employee is entitled to the holiday. The employer is entitled to tell them when to take it. It is not their right, it is yours. And make sure you're utilizing it as such. So 21 days notice, if old Tim never takes his holiday, never wants it, lives on his own with his 4 dogs that you're paying for, book them, book them, book them, book them, get rid of them. Abide by the working time directive. I often hear a lot of not many people abiding by this. Legally, 2 days off in 14, no options. There's no if, buts, or maybes on that. 2 days in 14. So make sure you're sticking to that and working it into your rotas. And then agricultural sick pay, our favorite topic ever. The qualification period for agricultural sick pay is 52 weeks. If they haven't been working with you 52 weeks, please give them SSP and follow those rules. Don't fall into a habit of, oh, 1 day sick, I'll just pay them full pay. Do not get into that habit. It's a discretionary habit and it causes issues further down the line. If they are going to go off sick, the way you calculate what agricultural sick pay they're due is you multiply their working days by 13. So if you've got someone who works 5 days a week, times it by 13, they are due in a year, or they're entitled to in a year, 65 days full pay from you under ASP, agricultural sick pay. Be careful of that because it's a lot of money. The worst thing is it refreshes every 52 weeks. So as soon as that year anniversary comes up and they've potentially been off a year, there is another 65 days has landed on you. So if you have to make a decision about ongoing employment, do it within the year. Do it correctly, but do it within the year.
We actually can't tell you how many current cases we've got on the go where employers are sitting with somebody who has been off. They've been off 6, 7, 8 months and it's already and they can't make a decision about what to do and they're heading again. I've got one I talked to today and in 2 weeks time the 52 weeks kicks in and he's going to have to pay another 13 weeks sick pay. And you've got to make decisions, get as much information as you can. And if you're unsure about somebody's ability to return to work after an extended period, get an occupational health assessment done. And that will give you all the information that you need, whether they can come back to work, when they can come back to work, what sort of jobs they can be doing, or at the extreme end, if it won't be possible for them to return to their job. So an occupational health assessment is really important when you're looking at long-term agricultural sick pay.
And an occupational health assessment will cost you £220. That is it. And it could save you thousands paying an employee that isn't fit to do your job. And we don't have the protection in law as employers to turn around and say, you're not fit to do your job, so I'm terminating you. Oof, unfair dismissal claim. We don't want to go down that route. So what we do is we say, I think they're unfit to work. Let's get an occupational health review report done. And let's see if they also agree with me. Because if they do, and the likelihood is they will, then we can actually enter into a conversation about end of employment in a very safe and secure way, protecting you against any third-party claims. And the final thing, I mean, I know, Mari, I know I can see it. I'm still going to flick to the last slide and then you can ask. Final thing, you know, we're HR, contracts. Please put contracts in place. They don't even need to be the snazziest things in the world. Those contracts will pay dividends at the end because they contain all the salary agreements, hour agreements, overtime agreements, tied property arrangements. Get them in place. They don't cost a lot to get done in the grand scheme of things, and they will pay out when it comes to having to end someone's employment. Okay, I'm finished. You can ask my question.
Okay. No, first thing I was going to say, I love the first point on your beware slide about the, you know, making sure that making people aware that the Agricultural Wages Board consider coming out at all on the weekend as a day, because I've
Oh yeah.
heard so many people caught out by that one, but they were only here a morning feeding the cattle. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter. So yeah, it's one that does catch a lot of people out, sadly. But yes, we have a question around actually around holiday entitlement. So it comes, you were telling us about special days and the arrangements there depending on which day it fell on, and the question is around if it falls on a normal working day and the double payment, are they still paid double on a special day if they are on a salary?
Technically, yes. Technically, yes. I knew it came. I saw that ping up when I said special days, and I thought, oh no, it's a technicality question. Technically, yes. So your salary wouldn't have taken that into account, because we don't take the special days into account when we're designing the salary, because they could fall wherever. But they are due, according to the AWO, a double payment that day. They're due to be paid a day's holiday, and they're due their salary payment. So what you would do is, however your payment schedule works, you'd run their salary for that month and you just drop on the additional for that day, and you'd actually have it on the pay slip. Please give out pay slips as the special day additional. You'd actually flag it up exactly what it is, then you cannot be caught out.
Super, thank you very much, Sophie and Gail, for another super webinar. You covered a lot there. I think you did well to fit that in the time. It maybe wasn't the time scales you were going for, but I still think quite an impressive achievement in the breadth of things that you covered there tonight. And it was great to see so many questions coming in from our attendees as well. It's clearly been a topic that's been of interest and real use to everybody this evening. If there are any last minute questions, do just get typing away and fire them in. While you're doing that, the only thing I was going to say was there was a good mention there from Gail and Sophie in the training and development angle about, kind of feedback, those kind of meetings. We've got some other farm advisory service resources that came out of another project that we worked with Gail and Sophie on, about some kind of processes and things to think about when you're having those feedback meetings. So I'll circulate the link to those in the follow-up email to you all here this evening, if that's something that you would like to start integrating and like a little bit of more information on. So Avril, just to answer your question, I did notice you joined late. The webinar will get prepared hopefully tomorrow. I got last week's the following day, and what I can do is I can send a link direct to you. It will go on the Farm Advisory Service webinar and website and YouTube, but I will be able to get access to your email address, and I'll send you a direct link once it's available, so you can catch up on the start that you missed. So without further ado, I will just thank Gail and Sophie again very much for their time this evening. To all our attendees, I will follow up with that email, and it will also have within it a evaluation form, which we would ask you to take the time to fill in. It's just a couple of minutes, but it's really useful to us to see where we can improve, other things we can do. But also, this obviously is a Scottish Government funded webinar, and they are always very interested to see how people rate the content and the webinars. So I will email that link out. You may also get it by Zoom, but last week Zoom's email was lots of hashtags and higgledy-piggledy symbols, so I will just send it direct from my own email address so that I know you've all got it. And if you do complete that, then you will get a chance to be entered into a prize draw. So thank you very much again to everybody for joining, and to Gail and Sophie for their expertise. It's been another really interesting and useful webinar, and I bid you a good evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye-bye.